All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're moving way past just admiring the problem of unemployment in a developing economy. Instead, we're going to unpack a really fascinating structural five-pillar blueprint for long-term remedies, specifically looking at India. We hear a ton about cyclical or seasonal job losses, but how does a developing nation actually fix deep-rooted, structural unemployment over the long haul? Well, think of a national economy like a massive, complex engine. To fix it and actually keep the population actively employed, we've got to look at the whole shebang: the fuel, the chassis, the wheels, the transmission, and the driver. So, let's dive in. Here is our roadmap for those five structural pillars: driving high economic growth, massive infrastructure investment, revolutionizing agricultural sectors, powering rural industrialization, and empowering individual self-employment. Starting right off with pillar number one, driving high economic growth. So, this first pillar, it's all about fueling our economic engine. Now, a high rate of economic growth generally leads to a high level of employment. But, and this is crucial, it can't just be any type of growth. We need what's called high employment intensity. It's a pretty fascinating concept when you stop and think about it. I mean, a fully automated, state-of-the-art modern factory can generate absolutely massive economic growth, but it might create zero new jobs. Literally zero. So to fix structural unemployment, this blueprint tells us we have to actively prioritize sectors and production techniques that inherently rely on human hands, not just capital and machinery. The economic growth literally has to translate directly into jobs. Moving on to pillar number two, massive infrastructure investment. Okay, so if economic growth is our fuel, we still need to build out the physical chassis of the economy, right? And a developing nation does that through massive, and I mean massive, capital injections into infrastructure. Just think about the sheer scale here. By pumping capital into road and bridge building, housing, schools, flood control systems, and transport, the nation is knocking out two birds with one stone. First, it builds the long-term structural foundation you absolutely need for a modern economy. And second, it creates immense, immediate work opportunities. You can't exactly build a massive flood control system or lay down a new highway without thousands of workers on the ground. It is an absolute powerhouse for job creation. All right, let's head out of the cities for pillar number three, revolutionizing agricultural sectors. We definitely can't just focus on urban areas. This pillar puts our engine's wheels firmly on rural ground. In developing economies, there is this chronic, kind of hidden problem called disguised unemployment. I found this concept super interesting. Imagine you have 5 people working on a tiny family farm. But honestly, the farm only really needs 2 people to get the exact same crop yield. Those extra 3 people are disguised as employed, but their actual economic output is 0. So, to solve this, we have to transition from basic traditional farming to high-value, highly labor-intensive stuff. We're talking fruits, vegetables, animal husbandry, fisheries. These take significantly more human labor and they yield way higher economic value, which finally gives those extra farmhands something meaningful and productive to do. But hey, just changing the crops isn't a silver bullet. Alongside that shift, you've got to build out the rural development infrastructure. Just like big cities need their bridges, rural areas desperately need small and medium irrigation projects, vital drainage works, and rural roads to actually connect all those new high-value goods to the markets. Doing this ensures the rural workforce stays engaged year-round, which is huge for cutting down on that seasonal joblessness. Which brings us perfectly to pillar number 4, powering rural industrialization. Think of this one as the transmission of our economic engine. We are aggressively targeting open, seasonal, and disguised unemployment right outside the big cities. And it flows in steps. Step 1, set up processing industries for local agricultural produce right there in the rural areas. Think rice mills, cotton ginning, milk, and jute products. Step 2 is supporting small-scale industries that have a high potential for hiring people. Step 3 is decentralization, meaning let's spread these industries out around small towns instead of just piling everyone into a few massive cities. And Step 4 ensures these rural industries prioritize low capital-intensive techniques, which the government often backs up with fiscal incentives. So you might be wondering, how do you actually get these small-scale rural industries off the ground? Well, you need a rock-solid network of support. We're talking about liberal, easily accessible loans so folks can actually start up. You need a guaranteed supply of raw materials, the basic local infrastructure like reliable power and water, and this is a big one, marketing facilities. Because if these small rural businesses can't sell what they produce, the whole thing falls apart.
there is this really powerful quote in the research that hits the nail on the head. The goal is to provide jobs to people near their native places, to diminish the concentration of population in metropolitan cities. It structurally curbs that severe overcrowding and slum development we see in massive urban centers. You keep local communities intact while giving them real, tangible economic power. But here's the million-dollar question, and a major pivot point for us. What do we do when conventional jobs, even with all this incredible infrastructure and rural industrialization we just talked about, are still not enough for a massively growing population?
That brings us to our final stop, pillar number 5, empowering individuals' self-employment. This is where we zoom all the way into the micro level. It's about empowering the individual through self-employment, especially in village industries and local services. But to turn an unemployed person into a self-reliant entrepreneur, the government has to step in and grease the wheels. It's a 4-part system. First, providing accessible credit, because it takes money to make money, right? Second, specialized skilled training. Third, a reliable supply of inputs. And fourth, just like we saw with the small industries, crucial product marketing assistance. The individual becomes the driver of their own economic output, but they need the state to hand them the keys. So if we step back and look at these 5 long-run remedies laid out on the blueprint, it's pretty brilliant. They are absolutely not isolated policies. They are interconnected gears of a massive, sustainable economic engine. You literally can't have rural industrialization without the infrastructure. You can't have high economic growth without an empowered agricultural sector. The whole thing feeds into itself to turn a surplus of labor into a massive economic asset. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to chew on. Think about how deeply all these structural solutions interact. If you were the one calling the shots today, and you had to prioritize just one of these pillars to ignite long-term employment in a developing economy, which one would it be? Would you build the roads, change the crops, or empower the individual entrepreneur? Thanks so much for unpacking this with me today, and definitely keep exploring these kinds of economic blueprints.